All right, good evening. We're going to get started here in a minute. I promised you this will not be a death by PowerPoint, but I did just want to allow people to come out and not have to stare at me while we're getting ready to talk about this event that has happened here that is just really, really sad. I can't stress enough about just how terrible it is to have this happen, but I think it's something that we really, truly need to talk about and just kind of see where we are with this. So we're going to wait a couple of seconds and get started here. So just hang on. While we're waiting, one of the things that we want to make sure that you understand that if you can, if you have questions, please go under the Q&A to help Wendy out. Wendy is helping me out. She is downstairs monitoring the Q&As. And what we kind of want to do with this is if there are questions, I kind of want her to interrupt me and kind of talk about this. So we're going to get started at 8:03. So we're just letting people get online and then we're going to get started. Okay, good night, good evening, everybody. I wanted to get out here and talk about this. This is something that I think is very important to discuss. I've kind of gotten some different feedback on it, and I kind of want people to understand what we mean by an after action critique. What in police work, what you have to understand is when an incident happens, something very serious happens, then one of the first things as soon as it's happened, while everything is fresh on people's mind, is that you sit down and you talk about things that occurred during the incident. And sometimes it's difficult because of things don't register. I'll give you an example. In a lot of shootings, officers have problems with remembering how many rounds they fired out of their weapon. What what the how the events actually transpired. I was involved in an incident with one of my partners that his timetable was off. His story was correct, but he didn't remember in sequence how they went. And it wasn't until we kind of, I mean, like we kind of had to work on it because his story had things in different places and different, time frame. And of course, this is a trained police officer that went through this experience. So when I first got news about this shooting that happened in Starrville, Texas, at the Starrville, Texas Methodist Church, I immediately went out online and started to look and see what the initial reports were. Why is that? Well, you kind of want to get an idea right off the bat whether or not it is a situation of domestic violence, a church shooting that happened while the congregation was inside the worship center. And one of the things that I noticed off the bat was that some of the deputies talking or giving interviews said that this was not kind of a church related shooting. Well, I know that a lot of people in the church professionals, safety and security world kind of got upset with that. And I understand what they're thinking, but I also kind of understood what the sheriff's department was talking about. This could have happened anywhere. It just so happens that the suspect broke into a church. He could have also broken into a house. He could have broken into anything, a garage, anywhere, but he broke into a church. So even though it isn't what we talk about a church related incident, what I talk about a church related incident, it is an incident that happened inside the church. Um, I that's just schematics, people. Please don't get upset or angry about it. And I'm going to say a couple of other things too. I am known for speaking my mind, and I'm going to speak my mind tonight. And if it upsets people, I'm terribly sorry. But there's just certain things that we truly need to look at, and we truly need to be thinking about when we get into church safety. One of the last things I preach this, I say this, you will hear me over and over and over again. The weapon is the last resort. And I'm not going to second guess the pastor. It is a terrible, terrible, tragic incident that has happened. I'm not going to second guess him. I don't know his mindset. I am going to give you my professional and personal opinion on this. But let's kind of start off with what happened. On January the 2nd, a suspect was chased by Smith County Sheriff's Office, a couple of other different police departments. There was a high-speed chase. He ended up blowing a tire. He ended up being hit by one of the state trooper cars, and the car went out of control and ended up right in the yard of the church. And he escaped, ran into the woods. The police surrounded the area. They set up a perimeter. They had dogs tracking dog trying to get a scent and find the person. They had a drone out. They kind of did everything that they would in any normal situation. They did not locate the person. They felt like he had gotten past their perimeter before maybe they had a chance to set it up. I'm really not for sure, but the following morning, now that was on June 2nd, and they were there till 2 o'clock in the morning with the accident, getting the vehicle towed, all the different things like that. And they were there until 2 o'clock in the morning on January 3rd. I'm sorry, I'm saying June, January 3rd. So when the police clear up, this is when they think that the suspect went back and went into the church. We'll talk about that later from my police experience. Unaware that this whole scenario had happened, apparently unaware that the police had chased this guy, that he had run, all these different things like that. The pastor of the Starrville Methodist Church and his wife and two other members went into the church early in the church to get ready for the church service when the pastor came upon the suspect in the bathroom of the church. He confronted it. Now, this is from the sheriff himself giving a statement that night. He confronted the suspect inside the church. He drew his gun. He ordered the suspect to lay on the ground. And after that, there was some confusion. Something disrupted his thought process of what he was doing. And the suspect was able to come off the floor, wrestled the gun away from him, and shots were fired. The pastor was killed. Another person inside the church was injured. The other gentleman that was inside the church survived without being hit. The wife, while trying to get away from everything, fell on her shoulder and was injured. Now, the suspect left, eventually was caught. The different things that we're going to go through, that happened. You can read this all online. It is all out there. If you want to go and listen to Smith County Sheriff Larry Smith, who gave a news conference, and it's a 17-minute news conference where he talks about everything that I've said right here. Now, I'm not doing any speculation. I'm not saying that or hearsay or different things like that I heard this. I mean, I've been talking to people in Texas. I've been trying to get as much information as I can on this. I'm telling you what the sheriff said. So the first thing that we're going to kind of talk about, and I'm going to say my piece on this, is that we're going to talk about lessons learned. We're going to talk about things that I really, really think that we need to discuss here. I'm going to put on my police supervisor hat first and my church safety consultant hat first to kind of talk about some of the things that I see that concern me about this situation. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a police story first before we get started. I was off duty one night. I'd stopped by the precinct. I got word from the desk sergeant that was there that people in my platoon were involved in a shooting. I immediately stopped and contacted my corporal on phone and asked if he needed me to come out. He said no, that he would be back in later to tell me about it. Now, the story is that a suspect, domestic violence issue, the person had a mental handicap, and he had gotten a hold of a knife, and he was holding officers at bay with the knife. He had his back up against a house, and there were 4 officers that were standing there trying to get the suspect, or the subject really, to drop the knife. One of the police officers decided that he was going to pepper spray the subject with the knife. And when he pepper sprayed the subject, the first thing the subject did was turn to run. And when he turned to run, he ran toward one of the police officers, and the officer shot and killed him. Now, when I had an opportunity to sit down with the officer who had pepper sprayed the subject, I asked him what he was thinking. And in his mind, he was thinking that if he pepper sprayed this person, that the person would drop the knife to put his hands to his face, and then it would be over, and they would be able to get to him. But instead of putting his hands to his face and dropping the knife, like the officer was thinking, he turned and ran toward one of the officers and was shot and killed. I questioned him, did he think that this was the right thing to do? And still in his mind, he felt that it was. Okay. He has to live with that. He has to live with that. So when we get into setting up church safety teams, it scares me to death when I walk into a church that has a safety team that wants to tell me that they've got 20 guys that are on the safety team and 20 guys that are armed. And they go out and they do shooting at paper targets, and they enjoy it. They have good time. They have good fun, all these different things like that. But that is a paper target they're shooting at, not a live person. Doesn't have it. It's a completely different scenario when you get yourself involved in that. One of the things that we do at Trinity Security Allies is we do the laser shot scenario training. I have had 2 people since we started this, and we've been training a lot. Now, it's not a large number, but I've had 2 people that have told me they're not going to carry after going through those scenarios, because they've never been faced with something to where a person is standing there with a weapon and challenging them. They're the type that think they can do it until they're put into that situation. I have had every time we do this church safety training, somebody gets shot. It just happens. They're not prepared for what could be out there that happened. This kid had a criminal history of being violent. This was a 21-year-old against a 62-year-old. There's so many things wrong with this scenario. I'm not saying he did it wrong. What I'm saying is he wasn't trained. I want to make sure that we're perfectly clear in this, that if you're going to carry a weapon and you're going to walk into a place that you think you might have to pull your weapon, you have to be trained in more than just pulling the weapon and firing. You just have to. This is the second incident in Texas, and it's nothing against Texas because I'm from there, but this is the second incident in Texas where drawing a weapon, to me, created more of a problem than it did solving the problem. When we go back and we look at the West Freeway Church of Christ shooting and we see it, when the suspect drew the shotgun on the church member, he went for his weapon when he should have just tried to talk this guy out of it or given somebody else the opportunity, like we saw Jack Wilson being able to get to where he could do a shot. But instead, he pushed the situation and ended up getting killed. I'm going to say that. You don't like it, I'm sorry. I'm telling you my professional opinion on this, what happened that day. I'm telling you right now that it concerns me that one of the things that we want to do first is go for that weapon. It happens. It happens. Now, I have no problem. Let me explain this. I have no problem with the pastor pulling the weapon. I truly don't. Where I have the problem is that he challenged him. I think the pastor should have pulled the weapon and started to back away. Hey, I live in Florida. We live in the state that you do not have to retreat. But I am going to tell you, I'm going to tell you right now that if I was in this situation, and I'm telling you, I'm 66 years old. I feel like I'm in shape, but I am no match for a 22-year-old street person, a person who has grown up on the street. And my first initial reaction would be to get out of there. My first initial reaction would be to protect those that are with me and get out of there. Now, that is my police point of view. My Christian point of view is I've got to ask this question. Why, instead of challenging this guy, did he not say, can I help you? When we are trained in verbal de-escalation, when we're trained in crisis negotiation, one of the first things that we do when we get called to a situation where it's a barricaded subject, a subject that's taken somebody hostage, a subject that has barricaded themselves in a room and is threatening to commit suicide, one of the first things that we say to them is, hi, my name is Jim Howard. I am with such and such a police department. I am here to help. I am here to help. This kid, now you got to think about it. And if you go and look at the pictures of his arrest, I cannot believe when he was arrested that the Texas police officers stripped him to where they arrested him and put him in a car with his underwear on or his shorts on with no shirt, no pants, and no shoes. So to me, he probably was found inside the church in that condition. It had been cold outside. He had crawled into the church probably for some protection. And I'm just wondering if the pastor had not had a gun, what would the outcome been different? I cannot tell you how many times I've done church training where pastors love to get in real early in the morning because they get in and they concentrate and they pray and they get into the word and they're working on their sermons and all these things like this. And they leave the front door open because people are going to be coming in here later and they're there at 6 o'clock in the morning and it's still dark outside when all of a sudden somebody's standing on top of them. They've left the door open. Somebody has walked in on top of them. I can tell you at least 2 different scenarios that I know that this has happened. And you know what the pastor had to do? I mean, one of the pastors, one of his first thoughts was, I don't have my gun with me. But his second thought was, Lord, help me in this situation. The guy was in dark clothing, standing on top of him. He had just had a huge domestic issue with his wife. And now he's standing in front of the pastor, completely out of it. And the pastor had to use his talents, the talents that he has. I'm not saying the pastor and Mark McWilliams, I'm not saying he did wrong by pulling his weapon, but he should have been moving away from it. And if I can get you pastors to understand what I'm talking about, if I can get some of you safety team members out here that think that you're going to pull a gun and shoot anybody that happens to come in front of you, you need to rethink this. That's the last thing. You only do it when you're threatened, and that would be that in your mind, that might be considered a threat. You might feel at that moment in time that is a threat. And I understand that. I'm not saying that, but the words out of your mouth should be something like, I need you to stay right there. I want you to understand that I'm concerned here. I don't know why you're in the building. Can I help you? It is cold outside. He's in this room. And like I said, I have nothing to change this statement here. He had nothing on but the underwear that he had on, no shoes, no shirt, no pants. Why aren't we reaching out? Why wouldn't our first thought be to reach out? Our first thought these days are, I'm a police officer and I'm going to stop this. That's the wrong thought. You are not
Jim,
a police officer. Go.
Before you go on, Jim Markowski brought up a point. He said, lesson learned, since the getaway vehicle crashed near the church, possibly police could have left behind a police presence knowing the church services would occur in the morning. That police presence could have cleared the church before any church hierarchy congregants entered the church. Consider an SOP for church safety. All hides are checked by a minimum of 2 safety team members prior to church hierarchy congregants and other enter the church and clear all hides.
Who was that said that?
Jim Markowski.
Jim, are you reading my notes? I was going to get to that in a little bit, but thank you, because that is very important. That is one of the things I want to cover from my law enforcement point of view. I agree with you. Since you brought it up, let's talk about that for a second. One of the things that bothers me about this is that I cannot tell you how many times I've been in foot pursuits where instead of running away, the suspect finds a hole to crawl into and is right underneath the officer's nose during the whole time of the search. I've seen it happen multiple times. I have a problem with them not contacting the church and advising the church of what's going on. I have a true problem with that. There should have been somebody that contacted the pastor, even if it was at 2:00 at night, and had him come up and go through that church. And then in the morning, be apprehensive about going into it by yourself. In fact, tell the police officer that you're coming back up here at this time. And can you, I'll be here at 9:00. Can you come back up here and walk through the church with me one more time? Here's another thing. And I'm going to bring this up. Why wouldn't, okay, you have a situation like this. They know he broke out a window. Now, I'm not saying that you walk around the outside of church. It's not a big church. But if you know that this has happened, why wouldn't you walk around the church before you walk in to see if you notice any type of disturbance or something like this window being knocked out? That would cause me to contact the local law enforcement immediately and say, hey, listen, your suspect was probably in my church. It's a good point. It's a good point. I'm also going to talk about that. I'm kind of sick and tired of people not having some sort of alarm system, especially when they're really cheap. It's a difference when you talk about you got a big church and you've got to put in a big system and stuff like that. But I can tell you right now that at my house, instead of putting sensors on every single wall and door that I have out here, I put motion sensors in the house, because if somebody comes into the house, I can break into a window without breaking the sensor or breaking the contact with the sensor. We've seen criminals do that all the time. But a size of a church that he has, they could have easily have put 2 cameras. And I went out online right before I started talking about this, and PC Magazine rated the Wise Cam pan camera. In other words, it tilts and pans and picks up motion and would notify you of motion, and you can pick them up for under $40. We need to start thinking about this. We have to protect the inside like we have to. The church itself, ours has an alarm system. Do you know how many times I go to my church and find the alarm system not on? It irritates me to no end, because then I know, just like you said, Jim, I got to walk through the church and clear the church and make sure that everything's okay. It's just that's in me also. So excellent point. Excellent point. This is also why we talk about having law enforcement involved in your church safety stuff, because when situations like that happen, they need to get on the phone and call us. We just had an accident in front of our church where a woman wrecked her car, had to be Bayflighted out. The car set on fire and all that stuff like that. They notified us. They should notify you when something like that, just the car running into your yard, they should have notified them on it. Somebody should have been notified about that incident so that they would be a little bit more aware of what is going on. Excellent point. Excellent point.
So I have James Shoemaker made a couple of comments. The first one was back about 15 minutes ago, and it was, I agree 100%, Jim. Not only can I not get our people to train, I can't even get them to shoot at paper. And then James also asked, so there's a training, how to get your safety team to train. And then what was the name of the camera? He's asking.
It's WYZE, and you can find it on Amazon. WYZE, and it's the Wise Cam Pan. It's CAM, and then PAN. And what it's talking about, it's a camera, but it's a pan and a tilt to where it'll follow motion in its little setup. We've used them at church. I mean, they're great for just walking in and putting it on a shelf, and it'll sit there and track movement and notify you if you set it up to where it'll do it for you. So I just want to go back to one of the things that I think we really need to continue to understand. Gosh, just talking about your safety team doesn't want to do training. We've had, since COVID-19, COVID-19 has happened. We've got a new group of safety team members. And I am going to say this is some of the best safety team members that I've seen. Not that I've ever had any bad safety team members. I just have guys that really want to learn more about church safety. We are not a police department. In executive protection training, I went in after 26 years of law enforcement into executive protection. In law enforcement, the first thing that we want to do is go after the threat. We want to go and, take care of the threat. People call us, there's a fight, there's a gunman, there's a robbery. We're going right to it. In executive protection, they teach you to move away from the threat. We need to start learning how to do that. Yes, we may have to deal with it. It is unfortunate that we have to. This pastor, gosh, I am not, this is just something that just really concerns me, because we've started to depend upon the weapon. To me, this is my personal opinion. This is my professional opinion. When I go out and talk to all y'all and you tell me that I just saw something, qualifications. I'm going to tell you right now, every attorney I talk to is looking for you in your church that you do qualifications. Because if one of your guys doesn't qualify, are you going to tell him he can't carry his gun in church? And if he gets involved in a shooting, that is a whole different, you have placed your liability up a whole lot higher. So I would be careful with what you say when you say qualifications. I've had this conversation before. I want you to understand, it is the person's responsibility that is carrying the weapon. That's why we recommend USCCA. That's why we talk about those things. Now, if you want to go out and have friendly shooting, friendly competition, friendly, let's go and just poke some holes in some paper, fantastic. You start keeping those sheets of when those people start. Yeah. Okay. David, I see that. I just saw that. I'm going to tell you something right now. Have you checked those guys that haven't hit 80% yet? Because I don't know how you tell. Do you search them? Do you search them when they come in? Because they don't carry. I'm waiting for your answer now. Because I can tell you right now, I can carry a gun inside the church anyway, and you would never know it. And if you tried to search me on it, you would become quite it would be kind of, I'm trying to tell you, I've spoken to many attorneys. When we have a shooting in a police department, one of the first things they go to is the records to see if this person's qualified. What is your qualification? Are you certified? And when you say you're certified, by who? As an NRA instructor, you can be certified to teach people how to shoot. You'll give them a piece of paper saying that they passed, all those things like that. But I'm just warning you, I'm just letting you know, as a brother to brother on this, I've checked about it a lot. It's one of those things, it's my worst nightmare of having a church being involved in a shooting. Exactly what happened here in Texas is my worst nightmare. So I would be really careful on that. That is just something, check with somebody, check with an attorney. If you know one, check with an attorney on it, please.
So Jim, we had a comment from Kevin McCon, and he said that they have an alarm system that self-arms every night just in case in case they forget to arm it.
I need to find out if we can do that with ours. I do go to our church every once in a while and find it not set. So, and it may do it. It may do it.
He said it was installed by ATS, monitored and it's professionally maintained.
Well, like I said, ours may do it too. I would have to check. But I do know that I've been on campus before where I've walked into the building, there's nobody there and the alarm is not on. And I feel like that when Wendy, you know how I am with alarms. Every time we leave the house, I turn ours on. So I just feel like that when nobody's in the church, that it should just, after so many minutes of no motion, maybe Kevin, this is kind of like the thing that you're talking about, it cuts itself on.
Okay, I don't have any more questions at this point.
God never puts us in a situation that he hasn't trained us for. I truly, 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 truly believe that. And the reason why I say this is because if we are in his will, if we get up in the morning and is in his will, we have to understand that he's going to open doors for us. He's going to do things like that. And it's one of these things of where, gosh, I like I said, I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but Mark Williams was a pastor. And from what I understand, he was a great pastor. So if maybe that day he would have just spoken to this kid and given this kid maybe what he has been needing for a long time, and that is for somebody to listen to him, we might not be talking about this today. The reason why I say this is that I don't know if you remember this, but on March 11th, 2005, Brian Gene Nichols was at Fulton County Jail courthouse, was able to overpower a deputy and shot and killed the deputy, and then went looking for the judge. And I think he even killed the judge. I didn't have a chance to go through the whole story, but I remembered when this happened. He changed into his court clothing, regular civilian clothing, instead of coming out in the jail uniform, and was able to escape out of the jail. He went to an apartment complex and went into an apartment, and he forced a woman there just to, we don't know what his plans were. We have no clue. And on her table was The Purpose-Driven Life. I know a lot of us have studied it and a lot of us have looked at it. And she started to witness to Nichols, and Nichols turned himself in later on. He'd already killed 2 people. I know he had killed 2. I want to say it was somebody else inside the church he had shot and killed. I think that sometimes we forget that we're ambassadors for Christ. And we need to always remember that. That's why we teach. If that's not what we're here for, then why do we teach verbal de-escalation? Why do we teach that this is the way that we talk people out? Because we say there's 3 types of people that come into our church. Those that come into, worship, who we know, those that come in that are hurting, and of course the wolves in sheep clothing. We just dealt with a wolf in our church. And the thing that we did with it, instead of just looking at him and telling him he could not ever come back to our church again, we told him that if he came in as his true self, and this is something we'll discuss later on, but if he came in his true self, looking for redemption, looking for God's grace, coming in as himself, he was more than welcome to come back. But because of the way that he was dressed in a deceptive costume. He had a lab coat on and scrubs and said that he was a psychiatrist, which we did our homework and found out that he wasn't a psychiatrist. And so we pulled him aside and said, you cannot come back dressed this way. So it's very important that we constantly remember that we're ambassadors for Christ. If you know of my past, if you know of my police work, if you know of anything like that, you have to understand I was the biggest duck in the pond when it came to, I wanted to be first in the door. I wanted to be first out, on calls. I wanted to be first in everything. Christ has showed me a way that I can still be that man. I can still be that man. I will protect my family to the nth degree. But he's also showed me that I need to continue to realize that these people that are out here that may be doing these things are still children of God. I feel sorry for the family because of the shooting. I feel sorry for the guy that did the shooting. I'm not going to mention his name, the suspect, because his life is probably basically over except for penitentiary for life. I've talked to these kids. I've been out here and talked to them. A lot of times they don't have parents at home. A lot of times the parents that are at home are not engaged. And this just, I don't want us to forget who we work for. And we work for Christ. We work for God. And we always need to remember that. And in situations that we run into like this, you know, I hate to say it, but it's like the old bracelet said, what would Jesus do? Here we have a good Samaritan moment. And let's be sure that we understand this. When the Samaritan went over to check on the guy that was beaten up and robbed on the side of the road, he took his own life into his hands and went over there because the robbers still could have been there and could have come out and robbed him and beat him up. When the pastor, I just wish, gosh, I wish for him that he would have just said, can I help you? You can't be here. Can I get you a blanket? When's the last time you had something to eat? Do you know what that does to a person who has been up for 24 hours out of their mind and they've had no food at all? And you ask them that question. Do you know how many confessions I got when I was a detective by looking at them and asking them when was the last time they ate and have somebody go and get them a burger from Burger King? We got to remember who we are. But listen, if it comes to the threat, I'm going to tell you, you have to deal with the threat. That's why these scenario trainings are very important for us so that we can help you in these type of situations. So please contact us. I want to come out and put you in these scenarios so that it starts to make your mind think. You start to see what can happen and what can go wrong.
So Jim, you were talking about collecting papers, and you didn't finish your thought on that. Can you finish that thought? Can I take you back there?
I think I was talking about shooting at papers. Is that what we were talking about?
I'm not sure. Will I find out? So James Shoemaker, at my previous church, I was open carry on the payroll in uniform with Florida Armed Security license because we had a preschool. We made the safety team sign a letter stating that they would not carry while on duty to reduce the church's liability.
Listen. I've had that discussion also. The first question the attorney will ask you is, did you pat them down to make sure that they didn't have a weapon on them? Look, you're trying to do everything that you can to keep your liability. You're doing everything right. You're doing everything right. You're trying to keep your liability low. I mean, you're trying to make it to where if somebody walks in the door and they say, this person right here was carrying a gun, and you said, oh, well, we had them sign a piece of paper that said that they're not supposed to carry the gun on property. Problem we run into is that, and this is kind of a different situation than what we were talking about with the training. I know that there's a lot of guys out there that want to take these guys out and do training. Listen, I tell you this all the time. I'm a firearms instructor. I know what the qualifications are to qualify for the state of Florida to shoot. They're not that difficult. In fact, I see law enforcement officers that have been on departments for several years that can't pass the qualification. So I don't, they're not that difficult. You know, it's just one of these things. So unless somebody's yelling at you or shooting at you, or you walk into a bathroom and there they are, until that situation happens, you're not going to know how you're going to respond. Law enforcement officers will tell you the same thing. And I'm telling you, let me make something perfectly clear here. A law enforcement officer put into the same situation as this pastor was would probably have failed also because of the distraction. Because of the distraction. By challenging this person instead of moving away from this person, creating the distance that you need, by not doing that, then he put himself in a really bad position. He's 62 years old. He's not as quick as he used to be. The kid was 22. He's a street kid, 21. I'm telling you right now that was a whole disadvantage right there. It would be a terrible disadvantage to me. I would be putting things in between us instead of challenging him to get on the ground. I probably would have shut the door and moved back away from it and started talking to him. That's just professional. I'm just trying to say, don't get yourself, when we do the scenario, we tell people don't plant your feet to where you're not moving back and forth. Be able to move, because what normally happens is we stand right in front of the guy as he's shooting at us. So these are things that we train on. So like I said, there's a lot of stuff to cover. I just feel so sorry that it happened. This breaks my heart that this happened. This was terribly tragic, but we need to be talking about it. We need to be discussing it, because I'm hoping that if it happens to somebody else down the line, the outcome is completely different.
So I got a response. When you were talking about when somebody that was qualifying people, Jim addressed him and said that it scares you when people collect papers, and then you stopped. Was he he wanted to know what your thought was. Is it don't collect papers, like target they shot it? That you've talked with a lot of attorneys.
Yes. Okay. And I'm going to say this. When I say a lot, let me put my hands up here. 4. Plus, then I also talked to USCCA on this. I've talked to. So let's talk about those. Okay. When you say qualification? When I do qualification for the state, I have to keep records for years, okay? Because there is a possibility that if this officer is involved in a shooting, they're going to come all the way back to his academy training to see how he did. Say, for instance, he just goes on the street and within a week, he's involved in a shooting. They're going to come look at his training records. Are you going to keep those records, as long as that person works in the church? The responsibility that you're putting on yourself, the attorneys tell me don't do it. Put the responsibility on the person that is going to be carrying the weapon. The state of Florida doesn't force you to do any shooting at all. The state of Florida does not require you, really. You just have to pull the trigger one time in a drum to get your concealed weapons permit. When you get into trying to set yourself and see, this is a volunteer this is a volunteer group inside your church. It's a ministry. And whoever's asking the questions, I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk with them. Please give me a call on this. Because like I said, I like my guys to go out and shoot. I like to go out and shoot with them. I'm able to give them pointers. I'm able to say things that most of the guys that I go out and shoot with could qualify the HR 218 qualification course. I don't know what qualification course you're using, if it's an NRA or something like that. The state of Florida, what they call the HR 218, which is basically a license for me to carry all across the United States because of being a law enforcement officer, is the easiest course to shoot. I could probably almost shoot it. I don't want to say I could, but getting close to putting a blindfold on, because of just how easy it is to shoot the course. It is not a hard course to shoot. So if we can requalify every year using that course, I don't know what course you're putting your people through. Like I said, please call me. Let's talk about this. I just know what attorneys have told me. When you start doing clearing rooms, when you start doing things like, USCCA, go out and look at our conference where Ricky talked about how USCCA is going to kind of tell you, if you're in there clearing rooms, you're kind of on your own. It's a completely different scenario if you're protecting yourself. If you're going after somebody, you fit yourself in a whole different category. So are you keeping the targets? I don't have to keep targets, but I do have to keep scores. We have to, time of day, all these different things like that it all happen. I mean, it's just stuff that we have to keep. But what weapon they used, all those things like that. So, and that's a whole different other subject. If I go and shoot for the HR 218, which allows me to carry, I have to qualify with a revolver in order to carry a revolver. I don't want to carry a revolver. I haven't carried a revolver in years. So, right there is, did they shoot a revolver this day for the qualification and come in with a semi-automatic the next day? It's just things that you could get in. It's a quagmire. It's self-defense. The only time you pull your weapon, just like this guy did, then to protect himself, but I just wish you'd have moved away from him instead of standing close to him.
All right, that's
Anybody
all we
else?
have. All right, that's all we have.
Okay. Well, hang on just one second, because if there's any other questions, you can still ask, but I am going to go now and grab the PowerPoint because I do have some stuff I need to talk about. Okay. Our church safety network meetings that we're going to be having here, and we're really excited about this, is we've got Alan Wilkett, who's going to be coming and talking about human trafficking that is happening inside the court. And what he's going to be doing is talking about how to identify the red flags in your house of worship. Now, the first one is going to be in Hernando County at Vineyard Christian Church on February the 9th from 7 o'clock to 8:30. They're located at 375 South Broad Street in Brooksville. The next one that we're going to have is going to be here in Pasco County, where we're at. The Church Safety Networking Group meeting will be at Generations Christian Church at 1540 Little Road in Trinity, Florida. The next one will be February the 13th between 9 o'clock to 10:30 a.m. at Scott Lake Baptist Church in Scott Lake, Florida at 5811 Scott Lake, Florida in Lakeland. Scott Lake Road in Lakeland. I'll get that right in a second. If you can, please come out and hear Alan talk. He is an incredible speaker. He comes to our conference all the time and he talks, but he's going to be talking about what they're seeing as far as the human trafficking and the red flags that you need to be watching for inside your church. These are excited things. I want to check on something I might have. Okay. We've started this. Now, this is going to be completely different from what we do right here. The members only Zoom meeting that we're going to have. We talked about it. If you want to be a member, please, my safety team members, I got to get with you because you are members. We're going to have a members only. And now the members only is going to be sent to the members, and it will be a face-to-face Zoom meeting, not a webinar. We're going to get online and we're going to talk face-to-face. We're going to get together and kind of talk about some of the things that we're seeing. Questions that you have, we want to address them. This gives you an opportunity to sit at your house. Please be wearing clothes. I don't want to see you, with no clothes on. But you can sit at your house and log on, and we'll sit and chat and talk about things that you want to talk about, not things that I always want to talk about. All right. It's almost here. We're hoping the end of the month. We're shooting for the end of the month. We're working really hard. God's Unseen Plan is coming out. $25 donation for the paperback, $30 or more for the hardcover. We're in the final stages. It is not anyway. Another story for another day. We have our Facebook Live that happens on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock. This is kind of just where we talk about things that we're seeing that's happening around the country. And of course, just to keep you up to date on anything that we may feel like is an issue that you should be aware of in your church. We have our resources out there, our free resources. Please go out and grab them if you need them. Putting together a safety team, developing a safety team, carrying weapons in a church, and Sunday morning, what to look for. We have our online membership program. Sign up today to access our online church safety training. And of course, then you would be put into our Zoom meeting. It's $25 a month. You get live online training. You can access it anytime and share with your team. Membership also gives you a ticket to our annual conference. And you have to understand the membership also supports our ministry. Visit trinitysecurityallies.com/memberships for more information or contact Wendy. Ways to support us: churches, $125 a month membership. That includes training, and that where we come out and do at least a full day or 2 4-hour trainings. And it also gives you tickets to the conference and access to our online training. I've started a new podcast or webcast with Kevin Haggerty on Thursday mornings at 11 o'clock. It's called The True Christian Talk. It's the world through a Christian lens. We are out there on Facebook. We're out there on YouTube. Please go out, listen to a couple of these. We've talked about the election. Today, we talked about what has happened in DC, what happened the other day where the state capitol, the Capitol was overrun. We talked about that at great length and what Christians should be doing and what Christians should be looking at. and how we should be responding to what is going on right now in this fallen world. We need to be strong, and we need to voice our opinions to make sure that we're heard. I'm going to kind of get rid of this because we've now kind of just went from God Logic Project to True Christian Talk, and that's where we're going to really be focusing our times on. Okay, I belong to the Faith-Based Security Network. There's a lot of good information out there. There's a lot of states. There's a lot of people out there. If you want information, please contact Carl Chin with this. It's a good organization. It's probably the only one it is the only one I really truly belong to, except for our Church Safety Networking Group, which is our local groups here. I want to thank you for coming out. Wendy, are there any more questions?
There are not.
I want to thank you so much for coming out. We're going to have some more really specific training as we see what's going on in this world. You have to realize that it is changing, and it is going to be changing, and it will be affecting the churches. And we want to keep you up to date on it. So please tune in anytime you can. These will be put out there. Become a member, help support our ministry, and get access to this. Thank you so much for coming out. Be blessed, be safe, and God bless this country. Good night.